episode 9 of Film Stop. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Us. Well, not you and I, but the movie Us. That was such a bad joke. Sorry. Well, thank you anyways for being here. I know that a lot of people are excited about the movie Us, and a lot of you are probably fans of Get Out. If you're not, then get out. Sorry. I guess I'm just in a weird mood today. So, Us. Us is Jordan Peele's second outing. It is a movie that I was desperately looking forward to since the trailer dropped, and I was lucky enough to have a friend as interested in watching it to watch it with me. As soon as I watched it, I knew I was going to. In fact, even before I watched it, I knew I was going to do this review and discussion. So just so you know, we're going to have a spoiler-free review, and then we're going to dive into completely spoiler-filled discussion and explanation of what I think is the ending and possible theories. So with that, let's go over the synopsis a little bit. So it's about a family that goes on a vacation, a family that comprises of husband, wife, a daughter, and a son, that goes on a vacation somewhere near Santa Barbara and realizes that they are going to have to face off against their doppelgangers. Who are they? Where have they come from? What do they want? And what is the bigger picture of it all? That's what makes the movie. And it's a horror thriller. I feel like it's more thriller than horror, even though people out there are calling it the more scarier movie between Get Out and between the two, I guess, outings of Jordan Peele. I think that it's definitely tense in certain portions, specifically when the doppelgangers and the family first meet each other. But I don't think that it's supremely scary. So if you're wondering if this is going to be a movie that you probably don't want to watch because it's going to be too scary, there's not a lot of jump scares in it. Having said that, the movie does stay with you. So if you're worried about the movie staying in your head and just images from the movie staying in your head, gore, all of those things, then don't watch it, because it does get very, very creepy. Alright, so non-spoiler review. I think that the movie is a very, very enjoyable outing. If you're looking for a movie to go to at the theaters this week, you should go watch Us. That sounds so creepy as a sentence. No, the movie is definitely worth watching in the theaters. If you are a fan of horror movies, if you're a fan of Jordan Peele movies, then you should go watch it. To me, Jordan Peele is soon becoming an auteur filmmaker that has so much innovation to bring to cinema. I am so excited about everything that he's going to do henceforth, because this movie, if anything, proves that Get Out was not a fluke. He has tremendous grasp on his vision, how he wants to portray the vision. I mean, the movie, for all intents and purposes, is technically perfect. There's not a single note in terms of how it's picturized and how it's told that feels weak at all. He has tremendous control over his art, and you can see that. In terms of the writing, I feel like the movie it feels a little. I feel like and I'm trying to skirt around spoilers here, but it feels like almost he wanted to tell so many things that he kind of entrapped himself into this zone of just a little bit of a potpourri that he didn't intend to create. Or maybe he did, but it just didn't gel together as well to me at the end. I enjoyed the movie, but just the whole just the different sort of tentacles coming together, or the branches going off this singular plot. It just didn't sort of all mesh well for me at the end. Um, Acting. I think the performances were absolutely brilliant. So if you're going into this movie, I'm guaranteeing you that you're going to walk out with Lupita Nyong'o's face plastered in your mind. She is absolutely brilliant as both Adelaide and her doppelganger, and really that's the theme here. Like every actor is brilliant because through the movie you don't even think twice that they're the same actors playing two completely different sets of characters. And these are Winston Duke, Shahadi Wright Joseph, even Alex. All four family members are great. Shout out to Elisabeth Moss. She never does wrong. I loved her. Also, really liked Tim Heidecker. I haven't seen him much before, but I think he was great in the movie. And I'm trying to not go into spoilers here too. It's very hard to talk about this movie without talking spoilers, but in general, performances are amazing, and really pay attention to the movements. It's almost as if movements were choreographed, and it's I guess this goes back to the direction, and maybe there was a choreographer, but also just just the way you can see that the actors had complete buy-in into Jordan Peele's vision here. All right, so with that, let's move on to a couple other technical aspects. I really enjoyed the score. There's a couple of tracks here that you're going to walk out with and almost immediately go in and start playing on your phone. The cinematography is, again, I'm using that word, so innovative, because with horror movies you have general sort of staple shots. You have certain exterior shots, certain interior shots, and they kind of follow a set pattern, especially when they're building to a scare. In this one, he completely breaks out of that, and it was something that you saw with Get Out too. I think he has a very unique perspective and really has an interesting way of placing the camera in a shot. There's this one particular scene, and I'm not going to go into it here. If you watch the movie, come back into or continue into the spoiler section, and I'll try to bring it back in. But it kind of just cements my belief in Jordan Peele's abilities to portray his vision on the big screen. He just knows how to do it. And then lastly, I think I can address the elephant in the room, the question that you have that you want me to answer, and that is it better than Get Out? All right, so here's my hot take, coming in real hot. I don't get, well, I get it. I get why people want to compare Get Out to Us. Two main reasons why, right? Jordan Peele and horror. I think it's unfair. I think if I compare the two and I compare them on purely entertainment basis, because that's the only quotient that I would like to say is similar between the two. I mean, they're both thrillers, but it's unfair to compare apples to oranges in certain senses. Certain sense. I think in terms of entertainment, Us is maybe not as entertaining as Get Out. I'm not dissing on the movie. I just loved Get Out. Now, that said, I will be watching Us again, and I think it's gonna have the same effect on me as Get Out did when I watched it the second time, which is I enjoyed it a lot more because I knew what was happening and I was almost watching it from a different angle. And I love that about certain movies and certain filmmakers, and I think Jordan Peele definitely has the ability to do that, and make you want to go back and watch the movie again and probably see it in a different light. So in that sense, I think I'm not well equipped to say that it's, for sure overall better than Get Out, and I also don't think that it makes sense to compare the two that way. I will say at this point, I think that Get Out in its first viewing had entertained me a little bit more. With that, they are both very strong think pieces, and I think there is a lot to take home and consume and digest, and again, that makes this movie a lot better than anything else that's out there in the theaters right now. That may not be true because there's Gloria Bell out there, and that's a very good movie too. Highly recommended if you haven't seen it. At the very end, I'm just going to sort of cap off this spoiler-free review by saying that if you haven't watched this movie, I'm just repeating myself here. If you haven't watched this movie, you love horror, you love Jordan Peele, or if the trailer just even slightly intrigued you in terms of a psychological thriller, go ahead, go watch it. You know what? It is more of a psychological thriller than a horror movie in my mind. So again, go ahead, go watch it. I think it definitely deserves viewing in the theaters. And now we're gonna dive into a spoiler-filled discussion. So if you haven't seen it, or if you don't want it to be spoiled, do not continue on. You have been warned. Okay. So, before we sort of dive into theories and thoughts, I do want to recap the story and maybe explain the ending for some of you who may have forgotten it or may not have completely followed along. What happens is that we're following a family of four who go on a vacation. We start with a flashback or an early in time sort of I guess, plot line where the childhood version of Adelaide walks into a fun house, and in the room of mirrors, she sees basically her doppelganger, and she sees this person or this other her, and I'm just gonna jump on to the story cuts forward. In the future, she has a husband, she has two kids, and they're off on vacation. On this vacation, we're basically following along Adelaide's point of view as she is trepidatious about going to the beach, and we know why, because she's had this experience. She tells her husband about it, and that very night, they find their family doppelgangers outside their house. These guys are violent, they're aggressive, and they attack them. They somehow get out of that situation, and they reach their friends' home. And this is where sort of, at this point, we also realize that this isn't just limited to Lupita Nyong'o, that is Adelaide's family. This is happening to Elisabeth Moss's family too, who's their friend. And then at this point, you further realize that this is happening countrywide. At least that's what news tells them. We follow along and we get back to the beach, at which point there is a slight deviation in terms of where the story is taking place. Now we track down. We go underground into the tunnels. In the tunnels, we find out that this is basically these people, these doppelgangers, are part of a government experiment that happened years or maybe even decades ago, where they tried to create copies and tether them to the ones above in order to control the ones above. And in this sort of process or experiment, the one thing that they weren't able to copy was the soul itself, which is why the experiment was sort of left as is, and there is this entire, I'll say, colony of semi-tethered clones that are living underground in the tunnels that Jordan Peele hints at the very beginning of the movie through text. And at which point we also understand that the tethered, or the clones, our doppelgangers, are trying to get up back on the surface so that they can be set free. They can live out in the open, and their way of doing this, or their way of claiming this, is through the Hands Across America movement. And then we get to the end, where Lupita Nyong'o's above surface or above earth character, above ground character, Adelaide, kills Red, and we realize that it's actually Red killing Adelaide. So what that means is that at the very beginning, when we're shown the younger Adelaide walking into the funhouse, she cites her doppelganger. Her doppelganger actually tricks her into changing out who's actually on the surface, and she drags her down and throws her into the tunnels, while the doppelganger makes her way out onto Earth. And this is kind of where they hint back at, the flashback moments where she wasn't able to talk as a kid, and her parents were confused about it after this event. We kind of realized that she wasn't able to talk because she didn't have a language, because the clones never had a language. All right. Now, that's pretty much the story, and I may have missed small hints here and there, but just to kind of talk a little bit about what I think Jordan Peele was hinting at in terms of theories. I have four theories here. So the first one, and the most prominent one to me, was him trying to hint at government and government control. So this one is pretty obvious, in the sense that pretty obvious is actually a funny statement to make here, because nothing really is that pretty obvious, but this one is the lowest hanging fruit. The whole experiment was for the government to control the ones above, and of course it fails, but in terms of what he's trying to portray, I think that there is a sense of, there's this, even if you look at the name of the movie, right, it's Us. He's trying to show two sides of people, and how, in my mind at least, he's trying to show one side is being controlled, or at least partly we're being controlled, or our shadows are being controlled by the government, and they're consistently trying to do that, and how in the current environment, this is again my theory, in the current environment, this other side that the government is trying to control is actually taking over the side that actually holds the soul. This kind of bleeds into my second theory, which is media. So the whole reason why Adelaide from above Earth, when she is tricked into sort of being left under Earth, she basically conjures up the plan and goes and does the Hands Across America above Earth. I think the whole reason for that is because she was so influenced and inspired by that one TV spot she'd seen as a kid. And that has something to speak to the effect of media. I think that's where he's trying to kind of merge two different themes, where there's the government, but then there's also media, and there's media also sort of brought in from that comment that the daughter makes above Earth when she says, or above ground when she says, there is fluoride in the waters and the government's trying to control you. These are slight comments that I think Jordan Peele tries to place them across, and then there's also the other political comment that when Lupita Nyong'o's character Adelaide asks Red, I guess it's the other way in reality, but when she asks Red, who are you? And she says, America. I think that's another sort of statement that Jordan Peele is making about the current, I won't say state of affairs, but the current political environment. So these are two prominent theories that I had when I walked out of the movie in terms of what themes Jordan Peele was going after. The other one that is quite prominent is the biblical/spiritual, which also connects back to the soul and soulless aspect. So there is Jeremiah 11:11, which I did some research on, and it's basically talking about how when the rapture comes, um, the cries of all those who have sinned will not be heard, and this is kind of when we let the soulless beings or soulless aspect of us try to control us and come out in the open, the dark side of us come out in the open, this is when there will be no help, and us humans will get what we deserve. Last but not the least, what I think is the connection with Get Out. So, if you remember the story of Get Out, the big twist at the end was that you realize the white folk are using the superior black race and their bodies to transcend, to transfer their spirit slash soul into their bodies. My last theory is that the maybe the people who were behind the cloning experiment are also, or maybe perhaps related to those who created the soul transfer experiment. The only difference was that the ones who were able to transfer those souls actually succeeded, and in some way they're both the counterpart of each other experiments, but they perhaps realize that the better thing to do is to just transfer souls than to create copies and replicants that are identical. I have no basis on this theory except for the fact that they both the experiments seem like they're counterparts of each other. So it just feels like it came out either from the same group of brains, or one was influenced by the other or inspired by the other. All right. Now, when I had mentioned earlier to discuss a little bit more about the writing, here's what I didn't like about the writing. All these theories, all these great ideas, and I'm sure there's more that I'm missing. I just felt like they didn't all come together as coherently as the ideas and themes came together in Get Out. And again, I'm doing what I said one should not be doing, which is comparing Get Out to Us. But I guess what I'm comparing here is the writing, and I think that I wish Jordan Peele hadn't taken certain decisions with the story. Especially, I wish he hadn't disclosed so overtly that Lupita Nyong'o's character is actually red. I mean, the one who's above ground was actually switched, because I think you catch that somewhere. I want to say in the first third of the movie, towards the end of the first third, when she starts saying or acting weird. So a couple examples right here are, one is when she kills one of the daughters of Elisabeth Moss's character, and she makes that grunting sound. Or another one is when when she gets out of the car and has to go and check on the below ground girl being tossed over into the trees, when they could have just kept driving on. She feels the need to go and check upon her, and then she does the whole shh to her as she's about to die. The third one is her yelling like no when the below ground version of her son is being burned alive. The fourth one, which is at the end, at which point you probably have guessed already that she is switch, is that she is not or she brutally murders her doppelganger from above Earth. I feel like you didn't need all these Easter eggs. I mean, or all these eggs. I think he could have just gotten away with our daughter is not saying a word since she was found in that fun shop or fun house. I think just by that much, it would have been enough for me to go back to the movie and be like, oh, what are the clues? Like that, and then the strawberries, right? I mean, she's not eating meat, but the family is eating cheeseburgers. That tells me that, now that I think about it, it tells me that, oh, she was just sick of meat because that's all she ate when she was a kid. She didn't drink alcohol. Like those are things that I wanted to I would have liked to have discovered afterwards, but I felt like that was kind of too heavy-handed in terms of the twist. It felt very M. Night Shyamalan-y. And then the other part of the writing that I felt like it could have been a little tighter is that they didn't, to me, have to explain everything about what was happening underground. I kind of wish if he was going to introduce so many different ideas, I kind of wish he had just either introduced, either not explained the whole thing in detail, or have like no specific idea introduced at all. Anyways, by that what I mean is that I think it would have been a lot more effective as if he would have actually just had enough explanation to say that she was switched, and not go into that discussion when she's cutting the paper into hands across America, figures, and she's explaining as to this is a government experiment and blah 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 blah. Like I didn't need that. Just maybe if it was left open ended, I think it would have had a stronger punch. I would have maybe thought about it more. Having said that, I mean, I've been talking about this for 27 minutes, and I'm sure I'm going to be thinking about this movie a lot more, even after this episode. I'm definitely going to watch it again. Maybe not in the theaters again, but no, I think that it's a very strong follow up to a brilliant first movie by this director, and I'm so excited to see what he does next. I honestly, genuinely will be looking forward to what he does next. With that, if you have any comments, thoughts, questions, you know where to find me. Join our Facebook community, Filmstop Podcast, and also follow me on Twitter at SURAJS Prakash. Well, we've come to the end of the episode. Thanks for sticking with me, guys. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.